So in the last video, we discussed permutations and combinations. One where order mattered and one where order did not matter. So let's look at permutations first. This is where order matters. So let's just think about, we're going to have 5 members on a committee, and we want to select a president and a vice president. So we're selecting 2 people, and one of them needs, the first person selected is going to be president, the second person is going to be vice president. So this is where order would matter. Okay, so 5 is going to be our total number, our sample size. So going back to all of our notation, N is 5, our sample size. R is the number that we're selecting. How many do we want out of that group? We're going to select 2 in this particular case. So I'm going to just put some names down here. So I'm going to say Bob, John, Amy, Jill, and Adam. Okay? So here's 5 people. Now, if I start looking at different combinations of ways I can select president and vice president. So I can select Bob for president, and then I can select John for vice president. Or I could select Bob for president, Amy for vice president. Or I could select Bob for president, Jill for vice president. Or I could do Bob for president and Adam for vice president. Then I could actually do the same thing selecting John for president. Bob could be vice president. These 2 things are actually different because in this case, Bob was president and John was vice president. Here, John is president and Bob is vice president. So these 2 things are not the exact same. So you notice how this is going through. We have a formula for this, and this is called NPR. So N is always going to be your sample size. So this is going to be how many you have total to select from, and R is going to be how many you're selecting. That's equal to N factorial, this exclamation point is factorial, and I'll explain that in just a moment, divided by an N minus R factorial. Now a couple of things to think about here. Your R can never be greater than your N, because first of all, you can't have a 0 in the denominator or a negative number. We can't do negatives. Now with that exclamation point, exclamation is what we consider a factorial. What factorials do is it takes that number and multiplies it down to 1. So if I say 4 factorial, it's going to start with this number 4, and it's going to multiply all the way down, times 3, times 2, all the way down to 1. So I would have 4 times 3, which is 12, times 2, which is 24, times 1, which is 24. So 4 factorial is 24. Now, let's say that I want 25 factorial. That means I would have to start at 25, then I would go to 24, 23, and I would have to continue all the way down to 3 times 2 times 1. Okay? So when you're doing these, you have to pay attention to the fact that, are you doing the proper factorials and things of that nature? Now, in our example here, it would be 5 permutation 2. So we would have 5 factorial divided by a 5 minus 2 factorial. Now I can simplify this because, first of all, 5 minus 2, I'm actually going to come over here to do that. That's 5 factorial divided by 3 factorial. Now if we think about 5 factorial, that's 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 3 factorial is 3 times 2 times 1. And I can simplify this by marking out 1 for 1, dividing out, and I would end up with 5 times 4, which is 20. So 5 P2, so permutations, I would end up with 20. Which, if you kind of notice, with Bob being president, there were 4 options. And I would do that for all 5 individuals, which would give me 20. I want you to practice some permutation computations, and then let me know if you have questions, okay? Practice marking them out. What you're going to look at really is, notice that whatever the difference is from the numerator to the denominator, that's what's going to basically leave you with. In other words, look at that denominator, and that's kind of what your number goes to here, okay? So if you have a 3 on the denominator, then from 3 down, you're going to mark it out, and you're only going to multiply those numbers ahead. So try some of those and then let me know.